Namaste, hello everyone. Welcome again to my NPTEL course, Role of Craft and Technology in Interior Architecture. Today we will be discussing module 26 and it focuses on the overview of the craft sector in India. And we are going to discuss a lot of statistics and lot of policies and the usual lectures that we see which have a lot of visuals. Today there would be a little bit more on the text side, but it's very important that we understand those figures and the concerns, and therefore I would request everyone to be very patient with that statistical data that we see. So we'll be discussing about the craft sector, especially in the context of India, and we'll begin by understanding what this sector means and what it constitutes. The sector may be best defined as pertaining to items made either totally or partially by hand, significant for their utility and or decorative value. Now, it's very important to go word by word, that's why I am reading and highlighting, because until and unless we understand what craft sector means and what all constitutes it, we will not be able to understand further. Taking a holistic view, the operational domain of craft includes statutory bodies, ministries, state departments, boards and autonomous institutions pertaining to handicrafts and handlooms as its core. While drawing upon programs and schemes of rural development, skills development, MSME, tourism, culture, commerce, labor and industry. So there are a lot of other things which are included in this sector, and not just what we take as decorative craft or hobby craft or just the handloom or the handicraft, but there are statutory bodies involved and there are a lot of schemes that are made and there are a lot of aspects that are covered in this sector. It also includes NGOs, social enterprises and market organizations, and has vertical and horizontal linkages with international markets also. Development and funding agencies, displaying a vibrant and dynamic sector responding to multiple trends and processes through a variety of media. So it's a huge gamut of things. There are a lot of stakeholders involved, there are a lot of layers and there are a lot of linkages horizontally and vertically. There is a clear value chain, there are different people involved, starting from the maker to the market, the end user, the consumer. So there are different people involved, and because there are so many people, there are so many stakeholders, and there is a sort of a complexity involved. That is where the policies and the schemes which come up, probably they don't really end up being so beneficiary as they are conceived to be. So let's see what is the overview of the sector and what are the challenges and problems and what are the different kinds of data that we see in the Indian context. So the challenge for the sector, it is mainly to achieve convergence of policies and schemes to optimize production and marketing. That is one problem what we see today, especially in this sector, that achieving convergence of policies is a problem and creating an ecosystem is a problem. How all the stakeholders in the value chain are linked and benefits are transferred to each other, that is not happening because of certain implementation level problems, certain awareness level problems and so on. Now again, like I told, there will be a lot of statistics involved, and let us just try to understand. So here I would like to just tell something important. Despite its rich heritage of traditional manufacturing skills, India's share in the international market for craft is under 2%, while that of China stands at 30%. Now look at the difference. And India basically is a country which was known for its skill and handmade and the craft sector. And today our stake in the international market is so less, and while China is really a huge shareholder. Today the craft sector in India is a fragmented and underdefined one. So the problem of non-convergence of policies and the fragmented nature of the sector is something that really is a problem and an area of concern and something which really needs to be addressed. With policies, mandates, schemes, roles and actors scattered across 17 government ministries, ranging from Ministry of Textiles to the Ministry of Women and Child Development. So we have 17 ministries and all these policies and schemes are just, fragmented, and they have this huge range from Ministry of Textile to Ministry of Women and Child Development. And somewhere a sort of way has to be worked out that this discord is done away with. Now, Ministry of Textile, it forms the core of the ecosystem for crafts in India. And the other related ministries include Ministry of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises, which are called as MSMEs, implementing schemes for enterprise development, Ministry of Skill Development, working via organizations like the National Skills Development Corporation, which promote entrepreneurial training, a much needed requirement of the craft sector. So then the Ministry of Textile works with related ministries and other departments, and there are different kinds of schemes which are formulated. The Make in India campaign of the Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion have the potential to absorb craft in its mandate for scaling up investment and marketing for Indian products. So other than the already existing ministries and schemes, we also have these Make in India campaign, and there are different campaigns which highlight and enhance the power of handmade in India and the skill, importance of skill and capacity building. So all of these things hand in hand are contributing to the upgradation and betterment of the craft sector, but there are certain issues at the implementation level or at the execution level that have to be really worked out. Now, we discussed in one of the modules about the creative and cultural industries, which has been developed by European Union, and they have been adopted by the UK government as the creative economy. So again, if we scan these international schemes or the models, then this one model now we see is also being followed in India, and it's coming up, and people are trying to understand the craft skills in terms of the generation of economy, boosting of economy, and in terms of their industrial value. So that's another parallel thing which is happening in the craft sector today, since we are talking about the overview, and this is something which is very recent and which is also contributing in some way to enhance the value of craft in terms of the commercial aspect and not just the utilitarian value which is attached to it. Then the other relevant international models which are applicable to the craft sector are the Japanese model of one village, one product, and then the government of Thailand, which focuses on one temban, one product, which is a similar one like Japanese. So these kinds of models are also being studied, and we are trying to, apply the understanding from the international best studies to our context and scenario, and somewhere they have really proved to be beneficial, and somewhere they haven't, because the context of India is very different from the international market and the international also the communities which practice that particular craft skill, because there are layers of culture and there are layers of empirical knowledge and belief systems and how a certain craft is practiced. So in India there are different challenges, and abroad there are different challenges, but definitely these best studies, when they are studied and some sort of understanding is gained from them and one sees their success, then it's being also applied in India, and we are getting some nice direction out of it. Now we'll talk about the 12th 5-year plan, because we are talking about the craft sector. 12th 5-year plan has been very important in terms of the concerns for the craft sector in India. According to the 12th 5-year plan, handicrafts and handlooms are a rupees 24,300 crores industry contributing rupees 10,000 crores to India's export earnings annually. Handicrafts production is expected to double between 2012-2017, and now we have already entered 2018, and exports are projected to grow at an annual rate of 18% in that period. The craft sector will consequently provide employment. Now this is important because craft in India has not been seen as a livelihood or employment opportunity, and mostly as a utilitarian or ritualistic practice. So this sector will consequently provide employment to an additional 10% per year in this period, which is quite significant and much better from the previous records. Yet the craft sector in India is highly disaggregated. Its elements and components spread over a variety of government ministries, state departments, non-government organizations, international bilateral and multilateral agencies, market and social enterprises. So again, every time we see, there is a sort of discussion on how the different ministries are operating at different levels, different schemes have been proposed, and then there is a sort of a fragmented approach which is somewhere creating a lot of problem, and the best results are not yet in front of us. Now the weaving and craft sector have a huge potential in terms of human and natural capital to create decent and dignified jobs. So specifically weaving and of course craft sector overall, when we talk in India in terms of Indian context, there is a huge potential to create decent and dignified jobs. With the upgradation of skills and an effective and functional partnership between industry, policy makers and training institutions. Now this kind of partnership is very important, and when we are talking about the overview of this sector today, this partnership is already flourishing, this is happening, so it's a good sign. But yeah, it has to be upscaled, there have to be more partnerships, more collaborations. Now according to the United Nations, over the past 30 years, the number of Indian artisans has decreased by 30%, and this is very alarming, indicating the need to reinvest in artisans to safeguard history, culture and an important source of livelihood. So this decrease by 30% is quite alarming, and lot of the artisans and craft persons are leaving their family craft practice, and because in search of livelihood they do other jobs and they don't carry their traditional family craft practice, and lot of the craft forms are also languishing, few of them are in danger, and so the data is very alarming and one has to do something about it. Livelihood development and the provision of social security and services are urgently required to meet the need for survival of large sections of the country's population. So livelihood development is one concern that we see as common in these 3-4 slides which we are discussing about the craft sector today. This is a gap that can be addressed by crafts which have an established skill and manufacturing base across the country. So this kind of a gap has to be addressed, and the craft sector, the decline that it is facing, it has to be really tackled very sensitively and in terms of livelihood generation, and it has to be done in such a way that at least the most immediate action goes to the languishing crafts and they could be saved. So there is also a discussion somewhere about the approaches today. So there is a critical observation that most of the approaches today only focus on the artifact or the end product. They rarely acknowledge the role of craft and the involved process as a catalyst for spurring thought and innovation in society. So sometimes just to boost up the craft sector, we tend to just look at the end product and we just give some intervention for the product, and we just try to just cater to the market need and in terms of the end product that is required. But there is a rare acknowledgement which is given to the process involved, and this process involved has to be understood by the people who have been tacitly involved in doing it since a very long time, and where this wisdom is transferred from one generation to another generation. So if the focus is only on the end product and the process is somehow not understood or missed, and that is not really soaked in, then one would not know what kind of continuity will the craft practice have once the process is lost or not understood or not given enough importance. So again, there are different models that we see for the betterment or the development of the craft sector. There are a lot of interventions that have been proposed, which we will see in the subsequent modules. But what needs to be understood is that there has to be a sort of an ecosystem, and holistically the things have to be worked out. We cannot just look at the end product and give some 10 solutions to it and then just upscale it and get the market going, and the livelihood will not be generated just by that. We also have to understand what these craft persons are strong with and what they could do on their own without completely relying on an outside intervention. So that balance has to be worked out. And it is this process, because we were talking about the process, and it is this process which seems to be getting lost, and it needs to be understood and safeguarded. Now, because we are talking about the Indian context, and it's very famous for the personalization and the customization of the craft that is carried. So the personalization, imperfections imparted because of handwork and use of indigenous tools and skills are the factors that differentiate craft from a commodity. So if we have to really do some work for the craft sector, we have to understand its soul. We cannot just continue to look at it as a commodity and to come up with an end product for a market. It has to be understood as a way of life, as a soul, as the way a practice is followed in a community. And once these sensitive discussions happen and then this empathy is established, I am sure with the coming together of different people from different backgrounds, there is definitely a way forward, and a lot of people are actually doing it. It just needs to spread more quickly and in more clusters. An estimated 71% of artisans work as family units, and 76% attribute their profession to the fact that they have learned family skills. So family, empirical knowledge, transfer through generations, processes involved, these are very important. They are the soul of the craft sector and they have to be really understood. Now, these are some glimpses of gap analysis table within the craft sector. It's very elaborate. The next 4 or 5 slides are going to have it, and I'm not going to discuss everything in a lot of detail, and perhaps we are also going to talk about the gaps, issues and challenges in the subsequent modules, but I'm just going to give an overview. When we see this gap analysis table and we try to understand the craft sector, we see how there is an existence of different schemes that we see. So here if we talk about Ministry of Textile schemes, there are different kinds of schemes already in place, we see them. But then what are the gaps and problems that are faced while implementing them? What makes them a success or a failure? So there is this entire mapping through this table, and it helps us understand what are the different ground problems, what are the problems at the ground level. So there are, if we talk about the sector or the issue, we will see the infrastructure, say workspaces or showcasing spaces. Then we will see the Ministry of Textile schemes and how these schemes are supposed to be integrated or implemented within that particular sector. that we see here through that infrastructure which has been identified. The certain gaps and problems that exist. For example, here if I see lack of data about craft forms, that itself is a big problem, and we as an academic institute can really do our job, can contribute in our way by documenting and creating a repository, and that's what we have been doing here through different projects. But this is like one of the gaps. So there is paucity of data on the craft forms itself. Then there is a sort of lack of awareness at different places, in different programs, in different colleges. Maybe there is not enough discussion on the craft forms or this sector that needs to be integrated in the curriculum. There are different institutes like NID and CEPT and IICD and many other. Now even IIT also has certain modules, IIT Roorkee. But yeah, it needs to be discussed more, and there has to be a need to create more awareness. Also, see, the artisan faces production and marketing challenges alone, needs infrastructure and spaces. So we always talk about creating laboratories and different kind of infrastructure, and when we talk about the craft persons, we would give them some raw materials, or we would help with the intervention in the end product or the marketing. But sometimes it's also important to understand what is the space in which they sit. Can we improve that? Can we give them some kind of infrastructure? And again, a lot of people are working on that, and I'm just discussing because I find it very important, and I would myself like to contribute in that way. So understanding this partial configuration of where the artisans or the craft persons work and how to improve their conditions, working conditions, their workspaces, their workshops. So that's another thing. And then we also see that while these problems exist, there is also presence of some new actors, and then there are some innovations that are happening which have been working to give some solutions. So production spaces can be enhanced by dovetailing with these different kinds of schemes that exist, and showcasing spaces, heritage and tourism sites, integrated heritage and craft tourism complexes. So some innovations are happening, some new characters, new actors are there, some new stories are in place. So it is happening. Also there are indicators through which we are able to understand what is the result, what is the progress, who all are the end beneficiaries, how much work is happening, and what is the number of these integrated craft tourism complexes, because if we are talking about this plan over here, then what is the exact number that actually got built or which actually got initiated. And then this table also talks about some risks and assumptions. So this is a total mapping to understand how the craft sector works, and how starting from these particular schemes what kind of problems are faced, and then what kind of innovations can be identified, and then finally what is the output and the number of beneficiaries or the end results. So there are different discussion on different infrastructure and different schemes in the subsequent slides. We are not going to discuss it in detail, but let us just flip through and see it. So this is another one, the Ministry of MSME schemes, the different kinds of schemes that we see here, and again the gaps and problems. And of course with innovations and the number of artisan beneficiaries as indicators. So we see over here, this is continued, some assumptions and risks that are important to be taken into account while either revisiting these schemes or taking them forward in another phase, or to learn from the mistakes that have happened. So all that. So such analysis definitely helps, and also try to make us understand which are the important sectors and what kind of schemes are already in place. So entrepreneurship development scheme is another very important one, and government is really doing a great job in coming up with a lot of entrepreneurship schemes and a lot of entrepreneurial training. But there are certain gaps which can be addressed through different innovations and different contributors and people, and then some indicators are also a sort of motivation to carry forward, and then also we try to eradicate the risks. So, this analysis is quite useful. Some more schemes and discussion on that we are not discussing in detail. Like this one I would like to, this is interesting. So, this craft mark, when we talk about the innovations, green standards for craft production can be enforced via eco mark, can be dovetailed with craft mark. So, this is again an interesting innovation. Some more. Okay, now we will also discuss briefly the overview of the performing arts industry in India, because India is again known for it. The performing arts industry in India reached INR 236 billion in 2012 and is expected to witness a growth rate of 2.5% over 2012 to 2018 to reach INR 275 billion in 2018. So, we see this growth rate over here. This is again a very important industry in our craft sector, and when we see these kinds of figures, there is hope that the schemes are in place, the work is happening and the growth rate is increasing. Several new initiatives have also been undertaken by the government of India for promotion of the textiles industry, including handicrafts. So, these initiatives are in place and lot of schemes are coming up. So, that way definitely government is very supportive and it understands the sector, and somewhere the governance related issues or implementation related issues, they can be definitely addressed and taken care of, and results would be much better then. So, the increasing national and international exposure across theatre, dance and crafts industries, upgradation of new technology and settings, rising global demand and emergence of varied performances being experimented as sources for performance are providing opportunities for the industry to capitalize on. Development of creative clusters within smart cities will again provide additional opportunity that the industry can leverage. So, again here there is a discussion on the commercial aspect or the economy generation or the employment generation from the craft sector and the creation and emergence of creative and cultural industries. How can these industries also contribute in a GDP of a nation? So, aligning the craft with the smart cities, all that is already happening, and there are a lot of initiatives in the craft sector today that are being experimented, and the results, somewhere we are seeing the results, somewhere the validation needs time. So, we again as individual contributors can do our bit in this sector and try to also come up with innovations. The government needs to adopt certain measures to improve the current status of the industry, as it is a means of livelihood for a large section of society. So, while there are a lot of initiatives being taken, since the livelihood of a large population is in question, there is more that needs to be done, and those measures have to be discussed and planned and implemented. Some quick visuals, we were talking about the performing arts and how the revenue is generated, and we see from 2012 236 billion to 275 billion, and then there is this increase over here. Again here the performing arts support activities also, we see a rise from 2012 to 2018. The export of Indian handicrafts, again we see from 2009-10, 2015-16, from 67.8 to 214.6 INR billion, rise that we see over here. We also see the export figure of handicrafts, and we see the different export items, and for 2015-16, 16-17 we see the increase in percentage, and there is a significant increase over here from 109.89 to 129.99. This is the figure. Now, the key challenges in the industry that we see, despite all these schemes in place, all the discussions happening and everything happening, there are a lot of challenges which need to be addressed, but identifying them is just the beginning, and it is also important. So, inadequate infrastructure, there is still inadequacy in terms of the infrastructure provision, obtaining sponsorships, lack of trained, skilled, willing artists, procurement efficiency, the rising costs, Challenges in the movement of artists. This is another thing. Rationalization of entertainment tax. There are a lot of taxes which are coming up, which are not in the favor of the small scale clusters of the craft persons. So some way has to be planned so that they could be really protected against all those taxes, and there could be ways in which there could be subsidy of charges to them and things like that. Availability of credit is another problem. Service tax waiver is a challenge. Pensions, insurance benefits for artists and employees. So there are a lot of challenges in the industry, but I am sure the government is already identifying these, and there is a list on a table here. So there is an identification in place, and there are schemes and policies that are coming up, and we should be all hopeful things are happening, and as individuals we should contribute to our best what we could do. So because we were discussing about the key challenges and issues, let us continue with this discussion in the next module, which will focus on the issues and challenges. So we will discuss that next time. Some references here. Thank you.